Hi, I'm Sarah Mann, and this is a Pecha Kucha about Kayla Janice's 2012 book, House of Psychotic Women, an autobiographical topography of female neurosis in horror and exploitation films. I chose this book because it's one of the most specific books I've found relating to my research. So, my thesis revolves around female teenage unrest in suburbia, along with a horror film slant. So, I've been looking into psychoanalytic and feminist film theory, as well as female hysteria as main sources of research so far. So when I found this book, I was like, cool, so can I just turn this book in as my thesis because it basically covers all the ground I am looking to cover. So let's get into the book. The physical book itself and the way it's laid out and organized is one of my biggest takeaways. So it's split into three main sections. The first is the analysis with smaller black and white movie stills interspersed throughout. The second is a 30-page full-color glossy photo gallery of film posters and stills, which is very beautiful. And the third is a detailed appendix, which, as Janice describes, quote, may be unusual in that it literally fills out half the physical density of this book, but this appendix is a cross-section of horror and violent exploitation films that feature disturbed or neurotic women as primary or pivotal characters, unquote. The usual or expected players are listed here, such as Carrie, Repulsion, and Persona, though Janice also includes some unusual suspects, such as Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's Black Narcissus, and Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. These appendix entries read like small blog posts and summarize the film within the scope of female neurosis. They're very helpful as the author often refers to a film in her analysis, so if you are unfamiliar with it, it's very easy to flip back to the appendix for a brief synopsis. Janice splits her analyses into 10 chapters, each covering different aspects of female hysteria or neurosis. So, for example, Part 4 discusses rape revenge films such as Abel Ferrara's Ms. 45, and goes in depth about the Electra complex, which is the female version of an Oedipal complex, particularly within Stanley Braslov's Toys Are Not for Children. So I should say here that this isn't quite your typical film criticism book. The author weaves her own story of broken childhood, mental illness, and bad relationships in with her examination of the same traits in the women found in horror and exploitation films. Her own experiences with external or internal abuse round out her discussions of films and really make her an expert on the topic. So what she found in these crazed women were stand-in mothers, sisters, and friends. She relates to them on a personal level and finds herself drawn to them because they have fought what are essentially the same wars. For instance, in her study of familial ties, in the chapter aptly titled Broken Dolls after Carlos Ored's film The Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll, the author discusses various relationships between family members, including that of a mother and daughter and sisters. Janice uses Robert Altman's Three Women and Brian De Palma's Sisters to explore the element of the doppelganger, or how there is a trope in film where women morph into each other. After a thorough and conclusive analysis of these aspects in the films, she relates her own persona-like experience with wanting to become like or embody in some way her older, rebellious stepsister Karen, who ran away from home at a young age. So using this framework of this kind of call-and-response type of writing, Janice navigates her way through the rest of the book in a truly refreshing manner, I found. She does not shy away from the gory details of the film she writes about, or even in her own life for that matter. She writes very frankly with a confident personal voice that I found engrossing and honest. I completely devoured this book in late night reading sessions, which is something I did not expect to do with a film criticism book. But the topics she writes about in House of Psychotic Women are salacious, scandalous, and controversial, though she never crosses into juicy tabloid territory. She treats each film, actress, and director with objectivity and respect. Even when disclosing super personal and private information about her family and home life, she attempts to understand where her abusers were coming from as a way of comprehending her own path in life. Though she writes about exploitation films, she is never exploitative. Sometimes she does become a bit too frank, if only for a sentence or two, and I suspect a lifetime devoted to the viewing and studying of graphic horror films may contribute to her occasionally flippant reactions to lurid films, but I don't necessarily blame her. Her life experiences gave way to understanding these types of films on a deeper level, and I find that her writing is a unique and innovative approach to the genre of feminist and horror film criticism. This book is dense with critical analysis and information, as well as emotionally heavy with aspects of personal memoir. But I found it easy to read and comprehend, and I sense that a lot of other women reading this book can strangely relate to it. Even though the films she investigates traverse into paranormal, supernatural, or murderous territory, bits of the women characters' lives are very relatable. While considering female vigilantism and solidarity, particularly through the lens of Deborah Twist and Todd Morris's 1997 film A Gun for Jennifer, the issue boils down to one of women existing in fear within public spaces, such as walking home alone at night with the constant fear of being attacked. These, quote, female issues, unquote, although I personally would argue that they're human issues, are what these types of films really speak to, which is why I think women can sometimes be greater horror film fans than men, or just have at least a better understanding about horror films. Ultimately, anyone interested in horror or exploitation film, or more specifically female neurotic representation on screen, would find themselves engaged by this book. Most of it is not for the faint of heart, so I would suggest proceeding with caution. However, House of Psychotic Women is a haunting read and will stay with you long after you've finished it, much like the films lining its pages. So that is it for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.